fear is not real. The only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of the future. It is a product of our imagination. Do not misunderstand me. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice.
Greetings world. We are on decay. We left off having exposed the Jesuits, who are the puppet masters who control the 13 families we know as the elite or Illuminati or banking families. There are 13 bloodlines in the Jesuit order, or what is commonly called the Papal bloodlines as well. They are Borgia, Breakspear, Somaglia, Orsini, Conti, Chigi, Farnese, Medici, Gaetani, Pamphili, Este and Aldobrandini. However, there are only 5 of these bloodlines that hold main power. Much like the Oppenheimers and Vanderbilts and a few others are part of the lower elite bloodline, they are not elite like the Rothschilds and Oasis. Those mentioned above are all 13. But the 5 top elite are Farnese, Orsini, Aldobrandini, Somaglia and Breakspear. These 5 are the Grey Jesuit families. The upper elite. The ones who control the black and white popes. We began this series with these families and hope you can now see their history. In an attempt to spare confusion, we will be calling the elite families of the Jesuit order the upper elite and the lower, more popular families, the lower elite. The elite bloodlines are all connected and interwoven. The elite marry elite to keep the blood pure, they include the lower families for this. The upper and lower bloodlines are from the same tribe, same family. Let's jump right into it and complete Pope Francis' history we began in the previous video. As we discussed before, the lower elite who control governments and banks are controlled through the White Pope. The White Pope, who controls religion, is then controlled by the Black Pope, who controls military along with the White Pope. The Black Pope is in turn controlled by the Grey Pope. The Grey Pope must be of the upper elite's papal bloodlines and is selected by the leading 5 families and their master. The Grey elite Jesuits elect 2 popes, a Black Pope and a White Pope. The Greys used to be the popes, however, have needed to remain hidden to rule. The election is called the Arcana Arcarum Rite of Atletis. Both popes are Jesuits and part of the Synagogue of Satan, also known as Society of Jesus. The bloodlines exposed here are all always involved in these groups. Since we have already covered the Jesuit Pope Francis' satanic beliefs, we will go right into a history of him to lead us into the Jesuit line. Jorge Mario Bergoglio was allowed to enter this world on December 17, 1936. He's brought with him corruption, evil and death. His sister, Maria, describes him by saying, "Personally he's got a strong character, and he's also got a deep belief in his convictions that's unbreakable. Nobody is going to be able to force him to compromise on what he believes in." In one of her interviews, she goes on to answer why she wanted Cardinal Odilo Pedro Sciarra to be chosen. "I've always liked him. He's for the poor." It wasn't based on any really deep analysis, but it always seemed to me that in his pastoral work he chose the poor. End quote. I thought Jorge was the one concerned about the poor like every other pope. As you can quickly find, the term poor is used to distract and divide us all. It's a perfect way to steer focus from the reality. When he was Archbishop of Buenos Aires as well as the highest-ranking Jesuit in Argentina, he did not live in the palatial archbishop's residence but instead lived in a Spartan apartment, which hails his Spartan bloodline. Buenos Aires is a large CIA stronghold. In 2010, Argentina legalized gay marriage, and Bergoglio described the new law as, quote, "a scheme to destroy God's plan, a real and dire anthropological throwback," end quote. Doesn't fit with his new tune of tolerance and acceptance of all very well. That's because he is a liar. He has also spoken out against gay adoption, calling it, quote, "a scheme to destroy God's plan, a real and dire anthropological throwback, a move by the father of lies to confuse and deceive the children of God," end quote. Repetitive as they always are. Nowadays he dismisses it all off by saying, "Who am I to judge?" Who indeed? In 2005, a human rights lawyer accused Bergoglio of kidnapping and torturing two priests, Orlando Yorio and Francisco Jalix, in 1976. Bergoglio was a superior of the Society of Jesus of Argentina then and denied the claim and has ignored the multitude of charges for his war crimes. The reason the charges came up were because the priests were the only ones who survived the months of endless torture until they finally escaped, nearly dead, from the hands of Bergoglio. He has murdered, raped and tortured children, women and men. Pope Francis personally trafficked over 30,000 children during the Dirty War. How many do you think he killed personally? We only know of 2 survivors. Regardless the number, the blood on his hands is much more than 30,000 lives worth, not counting the child sacrifices he has done while being Pope. As he was immersed in the Jesuit order most of his life, he has raped and murdered an unfathomable number of innocent children and adults, and there are witnesses. So, who did he work with? Walter Schreiber arrived in Argentina in 1952 after being extracted with 9,000 other Nazis in Operation Paperclip. All ID changes for all 9,000 were supplied by the Vatican. Schreiber met up with all his old friends, including George Hunter White, aka Mr. White, Sid Gottlieb, Dr. Joseph Megala, aka Mr. Black, Dr. Green, Father Joseph, Vatican and other aliases we have mentioned before, and made new friends, like Jorge Mario Bergoglio, aka Pope Francis, who was playing with his chemistry set at the time. In 1958 Bergoglio became an official Jesuit. As there is so much information on the Jesuit terror organization known as Nazis exposed already, we will not be diving into that topic here. However, once the Nazis had been transferred to Argentina, they began false flags spread by the media to create division and uprising from the citizens, as we see in US now and UK, to name a few. The President Juan Perón was murdered in 1974 so his bloodthirsty puppet wife could take over and begin the slaughter. Henry Kissinger was America's Secretary of State at this time and urged the Argentinian regime to act before Congress resumed session. He reassured the regime that Washington would not cause it unnecessary difficulties. Operation Condor was engaged. Rita Arditi describes in her book Searching for Life, the abuses of power of the leaders of the Argentine Catholic Church. She also details the set patterns for the disappearances, tortures, and murders, including vivid, but brief, descriptions of the tortures, such as torturing children in front of their parents, torturing the fetuses of pregnant women and inciting guard dogs to attack. Jorge Mario Bergoglio was a torturer and is personally responsible for countless murders. He also trafficked children. There were no tortures or extractions done without him first approving it. The Jesuits keep extremely detailed records and lists of all of the people they kidnap, torture and murder. They always have. The records from the camps in Germany were not recovered because, like all of their lists and notes on everyone in the world, they are locked in the Vatican archives and select Jesuit strongholds like Buenos Aires. One of the survivors' family members stated in an interview about Bergoglio, The question was about if they thought he would do well in the Vatican, the next puppet. The response was, quote, "Because Bergoglio thrives in power, I really doubt that the Roman Curia can step all over him like they did to Pope Benedict XVI. In that regard, the former pope proved to have no skill whatsoever to handle power, no executive skills. So I think Bergoglio is going to handle the power much better, and to the eyes of society and the Christian community he may also show a more humble and austere side of the church. He has attitudes close to the poor, but I don't think it's a liberate them attitude." End quote. We have made the connection of the Pope to the Nazi CIA Illuminati organizations during his early years. The CIA, like every secret service, is controlled by the Vatican and run by Jesuits. It's difficult to point out so little when every fact is as equally important as the last, but we must move on. Bergoglio was named Auxiliary Bishop of Buenos Aires in 1992 to prepare him for the launch to the Vatican. March 2, 2013, an anonymous cardinal commented on Bergoglio as Pope, saying, quote, "4 years of Bergoglio would be enough to change things." End quote. Certainly he knows what he is talking about, and Bergoglio has mentioned his reign will not be long-lasting. At least that's something to be thankful for. On March 13, 2013, Bergoglio was elected by the Jesuits as the new White Pope. His motto is Miserado et Caligido. This is the middle of a sentence of a Bible verse which directly translates to pity and choosing, coming from a story where Jesus had pity, compassion, on a man, choosing him to be a disciple. Miserado means miserable or pitiful. The Pope has summed it up to mean lowly but chosen. Not the same thing, but it's so fun to change the meaning of words and sentences, isn't it? He states it represents himself, the ever humble and lowly superior being, crowned in gold taken from the murdered and clothed in white to cover his blood-soaked soul. Just here to serve. Bergoglio was the lead Jesuit of his area during the Dirty War. One other thing he did was to kidnap and torture fellow Jesuit priests whose consciences couldn't handle the strain of their crimes and left their churches to live in the poor towns, which in his native language are called, wait for it, Villas Miserias. Also known as Miserado, meaning misery towns. He hates the poor, just like the rest of them. Please look into his atrocious dirty war crimes more, as there is much we have not included here. More on the websites as always. His coat of arms depicts the gold and silver keys and various Jesuit symbols including the sun, 3 nails, the triangular papal crown, a star, iron crosses, and what looks like the bud of a marijuana plant but is said to be a spikenard flower, which represents the saint of the Universal Church. We covered the symbolism before, so we will move on. However, we will reiterate Universal Church. January 26, 2016, the White Pope and top political and economic international leaders met in a meeting of the Knights of Malta. He delivered his speech on his new world order and addressed healing the planet and the dissolving of the world economy. The Laudato Si given has been actively implemented. The Vatican has called for the dissolution of the United States, United Nations, Federal Reserve, and much more through a constant spray of letters written by Joseph Ray Suda's son since 2014. Now they are making progress as more nations support them. One such note of Joseph states, quote, "The purpose of this letter is to initiate the peaceful dissolution of the corporate United States, a judicial entity that has no life force of its own, modeled on the Islamic Sultan, and its replacement with living men and women who are masters of their destiny, servants of all people, and become beloved of YHVH, our Father, the Blessed One who has mercy with his world." End quote. Another note states, quote, "The U.S. Federal Reserve, chartered by the Pope through Her Majesty the Queen is dissolved." End quote. The Global Settlement Foundation already has a cryptographically secured electronic currency in place. One world currency waiting on the nod from Bergoglio. Don't worry, your one world religion is already set up to say hello to your new beliefs. The International Standard Version Foundation will publish the new and improved texts and most likely already has. This is nothing new. It may come as a shock to many, but it shouldn't. The last attempt to stop it was in 1933 by fellow whistleblower Major General Smedley Butler, USMC. Congress at the time had enough power to put a halt to the entire process. Today, it has no power at all. March 4, 1939, President Roosevelt states in a secret committee, quote, "I am making no concessions to business, or for relief. I have a military machine sufficient to stop any organized revolt. I am putting my people ahead of all instruments. I'll have had a full understanding with Chamberlain, and we will destroy this unemployed condition with a war, and a war only. To hell with the American people, as far as a democracy is concerned. It does not exist. It never did, and we will never let it happen that way. I am going to crush business, infest America with all the aliens possible, and in the last analysis, declare martial law, and confiscate everything I need for a true and forceful dictatorship. My New Deal is a failure, and I know it, but no one else will tell me that I must discontinue my present activities and program. The instruments mentioned are all American citizens. By infest America with aliens, he means weaponized immigration, as planned for over a century. President Roosevelt and Churchill, puppets of the elite Jesuits named here, carried out a planned war after they bombed themselves at Pearl Harbor, put hundreds of thousands of Asians in America into FEMA concentration camps, and had every intention of creating a mass immigration to destabilize and destroy every economy in Europe and America, leading to the One World Order. Because there was still enough power in Congress, and because people stood up for what was right and blew the whistle, exposing these horrible men, it was destroyed. As always, the Jesuits laid low, erased history and started again. Then at long last the perfectly groomed dictator, Obama, successfully carried out the plan, because no one had the backbone or morals to stand up for what is right. It's never too late to do the right thing. It can be done with less people slaughtered as more stand firm, or it can be fought by the last man standing, as it usually is. They have been telling us about their plans for hundreds of years, but few have listened and even fewer have acted. Silence is acceptance. Pope Francis is what is called a white pope. He wears white and the black pope wears black. The white pope is controlled through the black pope by the elite families. The orders come down from the upper elite Jesuits, through the black pope to the white pope to the lower families. Remember, all of the pieces of a chess game are played on the same board. The elite play both sides. The world is just one, flat, stage. Always. Do not forget that, lest ye be deceived yet again. Don't look at countries as independent places, but more as states of the same country. Far more accurate. This will help clear up confusion from focusing too hard on one insignificant picture at a time. Everything is connected, so take a step back and see the entire piece. This late in the game, there's no point in dissecting every little event, as most have already been exposed to death. These false flags and wars are minor movements in the big agenda. If anything in this document has surprised you, then the true agenda of the elite will likely blow your mind away. So we continue to hold off on that. Events like September the 11th, Fukushima, the train bombings and shootings in France and UK mean nothing to them. They are like fleas on wolves. It's smarter to pay attention to the wolf, not his fleas. Once the wolf is dead, no more fleas. So how much power does the White Pope have? The motu propria, which means of his own accord, is an official law written and signed by the White Pope without counsel or advice or co-signatures or approval. The law is instantly implemented and can be created any time the Pope himself deems sufficient. This law is above all laws on earth. It carries more power than anything issued by the United Nations, Inner Temple, Middle Temple, the Crown of Great Britain, any monarch and any head of state. The motu propria was issued by Pope Francis on July the 11th, 2013. Again he was put into office March the 13th, 2013. The law states, quote, "In our times, the common good is increasingly threatened by transnational organized crime, the improper use of the markets and of the economy, as well as by terrorism. It is therefore necessary for the international community, also known as One World Order, to adopt adequate legal instruments to prevent and counter criminal activities, by promoting international judicial cooperation, also known as Global One World Police, on criminal matters. In ratifying numerous international conventions in these areas, and acting also on behalf of Vatican City State, the Holy See has constantly maintained that such agreements are effective means to prevent criminal activities that threaten human dignity, the common good and peace." End quote. Don't get distracted by fancy and lovely sounding words. We can be certain of one thing, that they will always do what they were trained to do. Pope Francis has imposed martial law. We are already in the New World Order, already governed by the Vatican, and the world is, officially since 2013, a police state. Pope Francis threw away all independent countries' policies and agreements on criminal justice. Now he can crucify any heretic he wishes. Don't think he wouldn't. In Mao Zedong's Red China up to 100 million died, for upsetting the monarch or for simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. We saw this in every fascist dictatorship through history. Many were concerned about the martial law that was passed in the US in 2015, and the whole world was already under martial law. The Vatican has everyone in the world's personal records stored, birth certificates, bank accounts, everything. Thanks to Google and social media spy machines, they have even more, your thoughts. They have owned us all since birth, and now they can throw you away just as easily as an old shoe. Thanks to advancements in AI, we will be. How did all of this Pope Jesuit crap happen? We looked a bit into the Jesuits and have already explained the infiltration of the Vatican previously. To reiterate that, the upper elite families select a grey pope from the upper five. The Jesuits select two popes. A black pope and a white pope. Both popes are Jesuits and part of the Synagogue of Satan, also known as Society of Jesus. Just as the presidents of America are not first-generation relatives of the elite bloodlines, so the popes are not necessarily from a pure elite bloodline. They always use their own impositions of power, but the pawn can be the product of an affair outside the bloodline or relation. Jesuit means Magi, who are sorcerers, magicians, astrologers from Persia. The term Magi is typically seen in the story of Christmas. Yeshu, now called Jesus, was born, and three, representing the Trinity, Magi, a term for wise men, priests and kings, gave him one gift each, which were given to be used on the day of his death. As usual, there are multiple meanings in the symbolism and physicalities here. Gold to pay for his body to be released to his mother, frankincense, which is a very expensive resin burned as incense or made into a perfume, used for burial, and myrrh, resin like frankincense, used for burial. They have never been named, as their names were erased and hidden. We have found them and have exposed them here. They were Zoroastrian priests. As we mentioned before, there is a lot of criteria the real Magi must meet to be the wise men from what we call the story of Christmas, which means Christ's Mass, a celebration of death. Do you see how terms are changed for us to accept them? Do you see how they deceive you at every turn to keep you from the truth? In those days they likely traveled with many others for security and to carry their gifts and essentials. The group stayed with the wealthy carpenter Joseph, his Syrian wife Mary and Yeshua and helped them plan their escape to Egypt and safety. King Herod was killing the male children, remember. There is far more to this story alone, but it would take a great many books to expose it all. Let's take a quick glance at the Jesuit takeover of Judaism, which was the only remaining belief system that spoke out against the elite and exposed their corruption, at its time. If you look at anything deep enough you will find, as we have, it has all been infiltrated by these people. Religious doctrines were changed, books were rewritten as we have seen in previous videos, and they have no resemblance of their former contents. Historical documents are labeled religious so people do not look to find the truths they still hold. Religion, education and science have all been created and corrupted by these families, which can be followed back, as we have already done, to the very first cultists. These separations and divisions is what keep people from knowing the full truth. Everyone is kept looking at a narrow window, instead of opening the door. Or more foolish yet, people find an elite infection and shut off everything entirely, again not looking or finding the truth, hidden and twisted as it has become. In this time, 0 AD, there were many groups, but we will as always look at the ones important for our genealogy. Sadducees, meaning just, also known as Samaritans, and Pharisees, meaning separated, are two of the sects in operation during that time. The Sadducees were a small group who were in charge of the temple and keeping the true teachings of the Torah. They were infected and overrun, and the Judeans were controlled by the elite-controlled Pharisees, mainly of Babylonian origin. The Sadducees had tried to keep under control by keeping them close but giving them no power in their system. The Sadducees protected the Torah, making sure it was never altered or interpreted, which leads to editing through translations of words. Basically their concern was purity of the writings and the belief. The modern-day Jesuits were called Pharisees, also Habarim, at that time, and they changed Judaism forever. The Pharisees were power-hungry, greedy, restless and war-loving scribes and lawyers. They were persistent in their desire to change the Torah and be tolerant of the Roman rule and beliefs. They emphatically preached tolerance and acceptance, much like they do today, leaving all without right or wrong, good or bad. Once you believe in no absolute truth, once you believe the lie that there is no good or bad, then you accept all they do. The pedophilia, the child trafficking, the biowarfare, the chemical warfare, the wars, the false flags, the cannibalism, the sorcery, the deep and the dark you accept as good. If you stop standing for truth, the hive mind will consume and destroy you. That is what they call peace. I can't count how many times I have read, in the multitude of ancient texts, historical accounts, journals, and other documents, warnings about lawyers and especially warnings of putting them in positions with any power. All lawyers are trained to know to do is manipulate and deceive. True to the original term hypocrite, meaning two-faced actor. They interpret words. Interpret means to construe or understand in a particular way. Whose way? Interpretation leaves too much room for censorship and manipulation. That is why keeping an open mind and researching all sides of every single aspect is so vital to being able to salvage some of the truth, and why we have kept these documents only pointing out facts and not our personal interpretations of the facts. The truth speaks clear enough. There is no need for interpretation. The Sadducees' untouched, original biblical texts cover the Jesuits extensively, as did the Christian documents before they were edited in the 1500s published Bible, specifically calling them the Synagogue of Satan, pious men and men in robes, especially pointing out purple robes as well as warning about their dwelling on the 7 hills. We already covered the 7 hills of Rome, one of which holds the Vatican. Out of Judaism, Protestant Christianity was born. Both of these groups are the ones who have been slaughtered, through all of history, for their beliefs. This does not include the multitude of genocides worldwide, carried out by them in a constant stream for depopulation purposes. The reason these two groups are targeted is to erase their beliefs, that is all. Protestant Christianity was formed after a split, people protesting against Catholicism. The Catholic Church was exposed for having twisted and perverted true facts. Catholicism was created by the Synagogue of Satan, the elite, to control the masses and keep them from the whole truth. The Protestant group was infected by the elite shortly after it began, as most things. Every religious group is infected just as every government. Wake up and see the truth, and all they do to keep you from the truth. Regardless of their editing, the truth is in the word for those who have eyes to see. The term Protestants came up long ago to describe those who protest. Free thinkers who cannot be brainwashed and accept the lies fed to the world daily. Protesters who cannot keep silent and let evil men rule unchecked. Protestant is just another term for heretics, dissidents, and anarchists. People who oppose the elite and let no law of government compromise their moral and spiritual beliefs. They refuse to be slaves to a corporation of death dealers. Protestant Christians are Christ believers who do not accept the indoctrination printed into books labeled sacred or preached from the viewpoint of any one human, easily corrupted by money. True Protestants hold the Sabbath day, the seventh day which is Saturday, as the holy day of the week, as it is written. Beliefs are shaped through knowledge, and knowledge is only obtained through independent, unbiased, open-minded research. The Vatican has twisted this only named holy day to Sunday in order to focus worship on their sun, the star, Lucifer. Why would anyone blindly believe a man simply because he wears a white dress? This is what we call brainwashing, programming, mind control. The Pope has been successfully the largest outlet for mass mind control, no competition. Remember, the elite created confessions so they can blackmail AV Catholic followers and masturbate to their confidences. They tap into every form of communication, and record it all, whether it's a confession to God or an email to your mom. We are all equals, no one is higher than another. It's time we start acting like it. If it is published, it has been edited by the publisher. If it is online, it is logged and censored. That's all there is to it. You find the truth while there is a bit of it left. The elite Pharisees created the Talmud, destroying all they could of the original Judaic documents. The Talmud gives them all the loopholes needed to rape, murder and all sorts of other satanic practices, even stating that raping children under 3 years old is not a sexual act or bad at all. It claims that if you rape a child under 3 years of age, boy or girl, once the act is done, they become virgins again. I hope that boils your blood as it does mine. In case it doesn't, I can tell you from personal experience, it's not true. What we now know as Judaism is just another form of elite-infected cult. They go after one group formed by truth speakers and then another, destroying each as they go. Not destroying them by raising them but by infecting them, tainting them, taking away all proclamations of truth and rewriting it as lies. Around 50 BC, King Herod, friend of the Pharisees, whom we discussed earlier, was threatened by the Sadducees. He had attempted to conquer the land of Canaan, just as they are doing today. Since the Sadducees threatened his life because of his warmongering in Galilee, when Herod was king 10 years later, he had 45 of the 71 Sadducees executed along with the people of power who had their support. Over his reigning years, the Sadducees were killed off until only 2 Sadducee families remained. Those who survived sewed the documents in their clothing and lived in hiding to keep them safe. With the Sadducees out of the way, the elite were free to control the monarchs, council of elders, which advised and influenced the monarchs, and the public unchallenged. They were the writers, the publishers, and the lawyers. They used their synagogues, stolen from the corpses of the Sadducees, as their media outlet and their profit, just as they used the Vatican. Pharisees are described as sons of Satan. Satan, a master of lies and deception. One heretic of that era physically destroyed their profit-making marketplaces and spoke out against them to the public, to their faces, saying, quote, "You, the Pharisees, travel over sea and land to win one convert, and when you have won him, you make him twice as fit for hell as you are yourselves," end quote. Exposing them for what they are and signing his death warrant. This heretic spent his life teaching the public freely how to live as humanity, while simultaneously destroying the elite's money-making schemes and exposing their lies and deceptions. The Pharisees paid the Romans to crucify the heretic from Bethlehem for this, stating, quote, "Blessed am I, for I am above all men." End quote. Pious indeed, claiming they are superior beings, not human but perhaps reptilians after all. Call them what you wish, holy men, aliens, monsters, demos, elite, their titles matter little when they devour all they see. So, these Pharisees were known, at that time, for exactly what they are. How then, could they regain their cover? You have seen their oath, the Jesuits use it today. They decided to create a facade for themselves. They would call themselves Jews, teach from the Jewish temples and synagogues and teach all new Jewish scholars, priests and other holy men. They lied, creating themselves to be educators, carers of the poor and sick, and tolerant of the law. They manipulated the Jews, by showing themselves as pious men, able to tolerate the law, the government, all forms of control. Very slowly, like we see today, they changed their tune until everyone accepted the new and improved Pharisees. Of course, as always, this is a very simplified summary so you can see the bigger picture by the end. We see the same tactics used by Pope Francis today. His urging for tolerance and acceptance of all. So, we are to accept and tolerate his torture, rape, trafficking and murder of children in Argentina and the Vatican. We are to accept the Jesuits' human sacrifices and bloodlust. We are to accept our slavery and murder. This is how the elite infected the Jews and all of us, religiously, which eventually lead to total domination. The elite Jesuits have been kicked out of countries 39 times through history, once exposed, even the original, uncensored, personal writings of the founding fathers of the USA described them in detail and many have tried to expose them. When people stand up and recognize them publicly, their house of cards crumbles. The only power they have is fear. It doesn't take war, or any violence at all, to rid us of them. All 39 times that the Jesuits have been run out of their positions, all it took was the people standing up and saying no to them. Drop your fear. Free yourself with truth. They must cage in all they rule. Close borders, build walls, like China, Israel, North Korea, and the Vatican. They can't abide freedom. They must create death camps called countries. They must create populations that are uneducated, unhealthy and unmotivated. They are masters of deception, made easy by their control of all media, education, wealth, religions and governments. Because they worship death, it's all they can see and they are blinded by it. They have no freedom because they swear oaths and pledges, a cult act which makes freedom impossible. As they live by oaths, they do not marry since that would create division of loyalty to the Black Pope who is loyal only to the Grey Pope who is controlled by the papal families we have exposed already. This includes all sections, Buddhist monks, nuns, Tibetan monks, Druids, Orthodox and Catholic priests alike. They swear away their free will. And instead of marrying and having a family like normal human beings, they traffic, murder and rape children. Remember the tribes and the Kaga and the Bek. The general and the minister, the splitting of power, keeping them, the true puppeteers, hidden, for the most part. This is the trinity of their power as they add their supreme ruler, Lucifer. The Great Eye. The terms were changed to the general being the Black Pope and the spiritual advisor or minister, as the White Pope. The bloody White Pope, which is Pope Francis, has been revealed to us now. As we continue climbing the pyramid, expect more.
Wake up.